Welcome to our new series on change. We're about to begin a month-long course exploring the idea of change, the process of change, and very practical ways of applying change and creating change in our life. Now, as we're going to find out tonight, change doesn't just happen. And in order to facilitate change in our life, we actually require a number of different things to be in place. And therefore, this series is going to take, as every series this year has, a very, very holistic approach of where we're going to explore different types of change, not necessarily because those are the most crucial changes, but we've found those are the most popular areas that people want to change, i.e. in health and behavior. And we've got different speakers coming in to talk about different approaches from their fields of expertise. And of course, we've got the meditation component, Kabbala component, and the scientific components, all at different times so that we can really approach change from a holistic view and really begin to understand our challenges, and more importantly, be able to understand what steps we want to put in place. That doesn't mean to say that you need to wait till the end of this series to change. What it will mean is that as the series go on, you're going to find the challenges become less and less. So that's how I'd like to view. So I hope as a result of tonight, if there are new changes that are being made, great. And if there are changes that are in place, I hope as a result of tonight, there's a bit more knowledge which will help make the journey slightly easier from a change point of view. So for those of you who don't know me, my name's Menachem Wolf. I'm the director of Spiritgrow, and it's an absolute honor that I could open this series myself. I wanted to be the one to open the series because I personally have struggled with certain changes in my life. And before we even start, it's very important to clarify for everyone. No one is to compare their change or the changes they would like to make in their life or the changes they have made in their life to anyone else. If one person wants to quit doing heroin and another person just wants to stop picking their nose, or if one person wants to just be able to let go of their mobile phone for a few minutes every day, or another person wants to enrich a relationship, it doesn't matter which one is more important, which one isn't. It's about the individual who wants to make the change. So there can be no judgment, and there can be no comparison. A person knows where they're at, a person knows where they want to begin, and it's not about a game. It's not who gets more points for their quality change. It's either we do or we don't create change in our life. So having said that, I've been on a personal journey, as we all have, and in the last year, I made some very, very deliberate decisions and changes in my life. They involved, I'm not sure whether it was a result of something external or something internal, which we're going to explore a little later this evening, but it involved deciding to take a more serious view on life. You'll say, Menachem, that's a bit scary. You've been running the show here for a while. What wasn't serious? I was serious about a number of things, but I felt that not necessarily was my spirituality really connecting with me on a soul level, on a very, very essential level, essential being point of essence, point of my being, in a way that it was completely changing my emotion. And that was something that I didn't wake up actually, that's rubbish, that's poetic. It was actually one afternoon that I was going for a walk and I just decided, and I remember that afternoon, I remember going for the walk, and I will even tell you how it happened, that I decided I want to start emotionally feeling what I've been academically learning all my life. Up until that day, everything I'd learned had been academic. I was able to regurgitate it. I was even able to get excited by it. But it wasn't dominating me to a point that I was feeling a full conversion, that I was seeing the world from a different light, from a different point of view. And I wanted that in my life. Why it happened, I'm not sure. It happened on a Sunday, so it must be an anniversary today. It happened on a Sunday afternoon. I left the house. I was listening to an interesting class, which I was streaming, and every time it reached 10 minutes, it was like really annoying. It would suddenly buffer and go back to the beginning, and it did this 3 times. So half an hour into my walk, I haven't got past 10 minutes of this lecture that I'm listening to. And so I figured, well, I can't go on like this. And so I just turned to a different section in iTunes on my phone, and I just listened to a pre-recorded class that I already had in a similar area of spirituality, but not the same section and not the same topic. And I started listening, and it was a 45-minute class. And I'm walking, and I'm listening, and I'm loving it. I must have listened to this class 10 times over the last few years, and it never connected with me. Suddenly, it connected. So after this 30-minute walk, I'm on another 45-minute walk because I refuse to go home until the class is finished. I get home, Rachel, my wife, says, "Where have you been?" I said, "I've been out walking." She goes, "That's amazing, but why so long?" I said, "I was listening to this class, it's amazing." She goes, "Okay, fine." And the next morning I get up and I go for another walk, not for the sake of exercise, but I've got to listen to the next class. From this series, I've got 65 one-hour classes loaded on my phone. So that's 65 walks that I've got to get done straight away. And everything is taking a back seat to these walks. The reason why I was walking was I just found that worked. And when you just find something works, you don't change it. I don't know why I couldn't sit on the couch. But I had to be walking, and I started inventing my own walking route that I walked when I listened to these classes. And I'm doing sometimes 2 or 3 hours of walking a day, so I can really truck through these classes. And then sometimes I go backwards, and so therefore I'm repeating classes because there were a couple really good things that were discussed, and it's starting to consume me in a good way. I'm loving it. I'm suddenly saying to myself, nothing else matters. It's just about what I'm learning. And it's not about the academia. I'm finding that it's taking some sort of hold of the way I feel about things and my attitudes towards things. And I actually find I'm improving as a person. And this goes on for some weeks. And that was really, really fantastic. I'm just thinking whether to continue. Yeah, I'll continue this with the story. It manifests to a point that after some months, that even Rachel says to me, I've noticed there's been a real change. I'm actually noticing this isn't just a shtick, this isn't just a passing fad, this isn't you looking to get out of household work, this is for real. I'm just letting you know, I've noticed even in the way you speak, there's been something that's changed. And that was really encouraging. That was really, really positive. It was a vote of confidence that someone outside of me, but probably my greatest critic in life, was actually saying whatever is going on on those walks is fantastic and it's making you a better person. Keep it up. So that validation was really important. And it keeps going and I keep carrying through. And after some months, we went away for the weekend, and I decided at this point that I would take the text, which I'd never opened. I'd never opened the text of the classes I was listening to. I just let it be the class and the walk. I take the text with me on our weekend away, and I open it up. I know you're imagining some like, didn't happen like that. I open it up, and I start learning and listening to the class while I'm learning, and it is amazing. And I quickly dash out of the house where we were staying, and I zip down to Officeworks because I've got to get pencil and paper. Because once I start taking things really seriously, I write them down as I listen. And I go to Officeworks, and I get a call 45 minutes later. Rachel's, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm at Officeworks still." I said, "Yeah, I had to choose." I'm like a school kid. You remember like that day before school, which pen do I get? Do I get the gel? Because this year I'm going to work, so I need the right pens. I was a really bad student in school, so I used to buy lots of cool things. They never got used. But every year I said, no, if I had this sort of diary, I would have used it, and I would have done my homework. Anyway, so she goes, please, just buy the pen, buy your notebook and come home. And I start, over this weekend away, I get up each morning. We were away for 3-4 days, and I am writing for 2 to 3 hours and just chowing through it and loving it. And I noticed some negative things start developing as I'm learning, and that is a certain detachment. And I'm not sure what that is. A detachment, not from what I'm learning, but I'm finding as a result of the learning, I don't want to be involved with things anymore. A lot of the things that drove me no longer drive me, and I am starting to not want to be around people because I'm not interested in having idle conversations. I'm not interested in having that engagement with people unless it's going to be meaningful discussion. So of course no one here would have noticed the difference, because in Spiritgrow I find that, and this is not a nice compliment, I'm not trying to be nice, but it's natural, but over here I'm always involved in some sort of positive, engaging discussion. People either ask me questions or I ask people here questions, and there's never just idle, useless banter. I find that even when I talk football with people here, it's like there's something in it. So, but I don't know what to do with it, and I just put it aside. I'm on my journey, and I'm loving it. And I eventually announced to, I tell Rachel, I think I need to go overseas for a few days. She goes, why? I said, I just need to go do this spiritual trip. And a number of people here know I went to New York for 4 or 5 days. And the reason why I went to New York was because the stuff I was learning is Chassidut. And the last Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was the last author of Chabad philosophical Chassidut, is buried there. And I thought, I need to go there. There's a yeshiva right next to the cemetery where he's buried. I want to just sit there, learn. I've got nothing. There's a bit of food there, and I just want to be there. And I want to just learn, meditate, and go and pray. And after backwards and forwards, because this was January and during summer holidays, Rachel says, fine, you can go. Which was probably one of the greatest sacrifices I can think that she's made in the last while, because summer holidays, we've got 3 kids, husband just wants to pick up and go. It's not ideal, to say the least. And it was fantastic. And while I was there, I had a conversation. I made an appointment to have with someone who I was listening, I'd now doing double classes. I'm listening to one original guy that I was listening to, and now I've expanded to someone else who's giving classes on the same topic from a different angle. And so I wanted to have an appointment with one of them to discuss some of the problems that I'm finding in myself. And what happened was, this has now been going on for months, on a daily, I'm talking about 7 days a week. I don't go to bed without doing my learning. And I try to do meditation every day. Not just stress management, I'm trying to actually really work through what I'm learning and bring it into my life. Go overseas, come back, something happens, I stop. Something at work happened, I was under immense pressure, stop learning for a day, stop learning for another day, stop learning for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and I'm not even saying, yeah, I'm going to start again tomorrow. It's ending, and I'm finding that I'm quickly unraveling, very, very quickly unraveling. And it reaches a point that I'm almost back to where I started. Couldn't care. It was back to being academic. It was no longer emotionally controlling me. It was now just back to, I love it, it's a great thing, and I get passionate when I teach, and I live by these standards, but it's what I'm doing because I've decided, not because I'm feeling this zing. And I call this my devolution. It's the opposite of evolution. I felt myself de-evoluting until I was pretty much, I thought, back to where I started, and I'm suddenly struggling now. I don't seem to find that excitement again. And so when I re-engage in the learning, it doesn't grab me, and it's a lot more work, it's a lot more effort. And eventually I get back into it, and I'm back into the learning. But it makes me think that one of the things that I did start doing, in my off time, was I started mentally documenting what is going on. Because surely this is the process of inspiration, and the lack of inspiration, the process of change. and possibly the falseness that I'd somehow convinced myself that I have finally made it. I'm not going to go backwards from here because I'm on a high. But the fact is, I wasn't ready, and I had nothing in place to catch me when I drop to be able to get me back on track. And therefore, when I stopped hard, and I had to then, in a much more difficult way, get back on track. And that's the premise and the beginning of what I want to what I want to talk about tonight. And in my preparation of tonight, I use this as an example. Now, I've made many other changes in my life, and I've probably made more consistent changes. I've probably made more challenging things. I could talk about the health changes I've made in my life and the failures in that and all sorts of things, but this was the only process over a 8-9 month period that I actually started documenting, not writing, but in my head documenting and comparing it to things I was learning. And that's what I've drawn upon as just milestones to help me understand what I need to present tonight in context of change. Now, I'm not a psychologist. I read a lot of behavioral psychology. I study behavioral psychology. I love it. I love trying to understand why we do things. And in today's day and age, there are plenty of great videos, plenty of great lectures online, and I don't know how many hundreds, if not thousands of books and essays and articles have been written. And pretty much every newspaper around the world will publish some sort of behavioral psychology piece, an editorial, an article, something almost every week. Why we do things, why we're drinking coffee, smoking, women, men. If you look in the largest section of most newspapers, there is always something. And it is absolutely fascinating to know why we do things. So I'm not a psychologist, but I'll draw on that knowledge. But tonight I want to present from a spiritual point of view, because that's all I've got. Ultimately, all I've got is an understanding of who I am, not just from a clinical point of view. I don't want to explain why we do things or how to do things, because you didn't need to come here tonight for that. You probably know everything I'm going to say tonight. All I'd like to do, though, is frame it in a slightly more spiritual light, because that spiritual light will help us project forward and help us extrapolate from current circumstances in our life where we're going, or what mistakes we're making, or what positives we're doing. So basically, I'm using an algorithm based on spirituality to predict our future, or to help us chart our future, as opposed to just guessing what needs to happen and just incorporating basic psychological standards in our life. So I hope to juxtapose and bring the two together. So, change. When have you wanted to change? I'll throw a few good examples at you. And if it's okay, Michael, could we just turn off the heating? Just we'll turn it off. I'm just cooking. I'm sorry if anyone's cold. When do we want to change? I'll give you a couple good examples. YouTube has the most inspirational stuff around. You watch these 2-minute, 3-minute videos. Who's ever heard of Alan Watts? Yeah? If I start repeating one of Alan Watts' speeches, you probably have all heard it. Have any of you watched a video in the last 6 months entitled, and it's all about what if money were no issue? And if money were no issue, what you would do with your life? Have you ever watched any of these sorts of videos which have beautiful mountains and snows and rivers and oceans and just makes you want to get up? Or you've watched a video, especially around Olympic time, they always have this sort of stuff, of these marathon runners who tore a ligament, tore their hamstrings or something, but they kept running, and they're from Barbados or some war-torn African country, and you just want to cry as you watch, and they make these inspirational statements like, my country didn't send me to run the race, they sent me to finish the race. And you just go, I want to run the race. How many times have you watched videos? Nike just put out, it's making its rounds, it's a 3-minute video of the voices in your head, and you'd want to press snooze, but no, and it's all so inspirational because you've got people running and they're sweating. And when you watch videos of people running and sweating with the best dramatic music and they're blowing steam through their mouth, you go, that's me. I am going to be doing that. And you get up the next morning and you try running after not running for 20 years, and you're like puffed out by the time you get to the end of the block, and quickly it dawns on you, you are not the guy from the Nike ad. You are the guy from the block, or the girl from the block, that doesn't seem to ever, and if this is what it feels like to wear Nikes, I'll give up now. We've watched these sorts of videos. We've watched those Vietnam movies where there's some American general that gives that fire speech that makes you just have the tingles. We've watched these sorts of things. Or we've listened to music, songs, inspirational songs, not gospel, but inspirational songs of some sort of message, the hurricane, or whatever it is, and you go, yes, this is my sort of workout music. Or you watch Rocky. Who's listened to the Rocky music and said, yeah, I can run, and done that, like, Rocky, you're not Sylvester Stallone because you can do that to the music, but we get into it. And so there are different things that motivate us. These are very, very common. I'm very curious to know, everyone here, how many times have you resolved that I'm going to make a change? I'm going to start exercising, or that's it. You've read 14 great articles today online on how to lose weight. They all say the same thing. Eat less carbs, eat less full stop, cut out junk, do a bit of exercise, you'll be healthy. But you go, no, I want to read this one, I want to read that one, and that's it. Changing my cupboard tomorrow, changing my pantry tomorrow. I'm going to start eating healthy, or you start going organic. How many people have gone organic multiple times? These are very common changes. How many times have you cleaned up your bedroom and your bed's all neat and you go to bed at 11 o'clock and go, that's it, it's the new me. In bed every night before 11, clean room. And then by the end of the week, the clothing's on the clothing stand, the washing has piled up again. It was just a long week and boom, it's gone. We make so many changes and they fail. I'm sorry if I've completely broken you down, but I'm just telling you, obviously I do have a very messy room on my side of the room. Obviously I do go to bed well after 11. Obviously I have tried, we've gone, because I'm not in charge of the fruit and veggie shopping at home, we actually are quite organic, thanks to Rachel. But I obviously have cut out junk food a number of times in my life. I have started jogging and stopped a number of times. I have gotten up at all different times of the night and morning to try doing my exercise. I have bought skipping ropes galore because you read skipping ropes is the best cardiovascular you can do. I have spent well over $150 in the last few years on skipping ropes. These ones have weights, I know, because I spent $30 on this instead of the normal $2 one. I'm really going to do it. Yeah, for 2 days I've skipped rope. I don't think in the past 8 years I've ever skipped rope for more than 2 or 3 days in a row. But I've skipped rope many times. So I'm just telling you about myself. If any of you relate to this, great. But there are other times that we make changes. Who here has been on a long-haul international flight in the last year? Okay. How many of you watched movies on that flight? Besides the fact that we watch slightly different movies than we're accustomed to when we fly, which is a very interesting thing, a very interesting study that came out of England spoke about, there have been a number of studies, but this particular one that I read that came out of England was how we're more emotional when we fly. And there are a number of different reasons why we're more emotional, to do with the oxygen levels and the pressure and the fatigue and all that. But one of the things that we do when we fly is we cry when we watch movies. Now, I'm a man saying it, so suddenly everyone's going, yes, and if you haven't, you probably know someone that has cried, and if you don't, then all your friends are liars, because people do cry. The study showed, and this was a study of thousands of people, including executives. So I'm talking to a guy, there's a guy that comes to Spiritgrow to certain classes, and he's always flying. He's a very busy business person who's got a lot of interests in different parts of the world, and he says he cries non-stop every time he flies. This is a guy, and he said, it's an embarrassment. I'm sitting there, and he does fly business and first, and he goes, you almost think like you're a certain model. I sit there, I'm just bawling. I watch kids movies, and I'm just crying. I can't stop thinking about my wife and my children. And I was like, yes, same. I don't bawl, but I definitely tear up when I watch, which is one of the reasons why I stopped watching on the plane. No, there are other reasons. But people do cry when they fly. And one of the deepest psychological reasons as to why we cry when we fly is because we watch movies that are either about a spouse or a child, and usually in a movie something bad happens, and you superimpose it to be your loved one, and you're like, I'm so distant, I'm in this nature thing that's defying gravity for the moment. We could go down crashing and burning. Will I ever make it home alive again to see my loved ones? And if these were my loved ones, I just would want to hold them for the rest of my life. And these are thoughts that go through people's minds when they're flying. And therefore, when we fly, and when we're away from family or away from friends, we make sort of resolutions like, I'm just going to spend more quality time with them. I'm not going to be on the phone. I'm not going to be distracted. I just want to be with my kids. I just want to be with my parents or siblings or friends or partners, wherever you're up to in life. And we make these things, then we come back and we tell the stories about our travels, and then we slip right back into our normal routine. So an aeroplane is a place, or overseas is a place that we do make changes, and statistically this is not uncommon. And we make changes and yet they don't carry through. So the question is, why is it so difficult? And I could launch into a very interesting psychological discussion as to why it's so difficult to keep up these changes, but I don't want to. I want to talk about us from a spiritual point of view and understand why there is such challenge. Every human being is made up of two components of a soul. So we're just acknowledging tonight that everyone has a soul. Everyone has an energy force that allows them to exist. It's the difference between living and dying. Living people have it, dead people don't. They have everything else in common except the soul. The soul is inside a living person, the soul is not inside a dead person. It's outside of a dead person. And that soul is made up of a number of different components. Now, if I had to divide the person into two parts, we have a higher conscious side to us, and we have an animal side to us. The Nefesh Elokit, which is translated, but it's inaccurate. It's accurate, but it's misleading as the godly soul. It's the higher conscious self. And the Nefesh Bahamit is the animal soul, which betrays a much truer meaning of what it is. It is our animal side, not our vicious side. It's not our bad side. It's the part of us, it's our ego that allows us to exist. It's the part of us that allows us to live. It's the animal, it's the instinctive side. Now, the Nefesh Elokis resides primarily in the brain. Higher consciousness in the human being, and being that higher consciousness is something quite unique in all of nature to the human, it's in our mind. It's in our brain, so to speak. We are aware of ourselves up here. We can think of ourselves. We can judge ourselves. We can make decisions, conscious decisions for ourselves. The animal side, so to speak, where would you expect to find that? In your heart, being the seat of your emotions. Of course, it's not physically in your brain and physically in your heart, but one is your intellectual capacity, and one is on your emotional level. Your instinctive is you don't have a good feeling about something, or you do have a good feeling about something, and that feeling sends a message to the brain as to how to behave, which is how Herbert Benson, one of the greatest doctors in America today, came up with a whole relaxation response about the mind sends signals to the brain, but the emotions send signals to the mind, and the mind then responds. We go into this fight or flight. But if we can conquer that and change that by saying, no, I'm now in control, and you start changing the symptoms, you can actually start relaxing. See the relaxation response. Google it. Buy the book. The Nefesh Elokis and the Nefesh Bahamis work as such. The Nefesh Elokis is saying we live for a higher reason. The Nefesh Elokis is constantly saying there's a deeper reason for everything. The Nefesh Elokis is saying we want to connect with something higher. We want to be part of a greater collective. The Nefesh Elokis wants to do nothing wrong. And the only right it wants to do is do what's right by everyone else and allow everyone else to connect with something far higher and get the whole world into a higher conscious state. That is all the Nefesh Elokis wants to do. The Nefesh Bahamit's job is keep the body alive, because if you listen to that altruistic being, you're going to end up dead, because that thing doesn't have time to eat. It just wants to study. It just wants to do good. You're going to end up with nothing. You listen to me, my friend. And the Nefesh Bahamit is our instinct that keeps us alive. The Nefesh Bahamit says, hungry, go eat. Nefesh Elokit says, hungry? Ooh, here's an opportunity to start meditating and eating consciously. By the time you get around to eating, you'll probably have lost who knows how much weight, because you'll be wondering, is this or is this not what I should be eating? Nefesh Bahamit says, eat, go get food. It's the animal that says, hungry, go hunt. Our way of hunting today is by opening the fridge, by opening the pantry, etc. The Nefesh Bahamut is the one that says, man, you like female. Why? Because together we procreate. It's the caveman within us. Procreate, go procreate. Fantastic. Nefesh Elokit says, remember when procreating, she too is a human. Not only is she too a person, but she too is a soul. She is a wonderful thing. You're about to engage in one of the most greatest, beautiful spiritual acts of creation. Nefesh Bahamut is like, yeah, please, you're distracting me right now. Nefesh Bahamut is the thing that keeps us alive. It's the thing that keeps us going, and that is not a bad thing. The only time the Nefesh Bahamut becomes a little bit of a challenge is when we are not aware that we have a Nefesh Bahamut, and therefore we have no moral compass. When we are not aware of ourselves, and we are not aware of our morals and our standards and our values, the Nefesh Bahamut just keeps growing. And what happens to anything that keeps growing? It requires more. Nefesh Bahamut never is still. It's constantly hungry. And as we know, that when dieting, it's not about starving ourselves, it's about eating exactly the right amount that we need. You eat more, and as the body grows, then the body psychologically and emotionally and physically starts demanding more. We enter this vicious cycle. If we could just say, no, this is fine, and train ourselves that this is fine, then this would be fine. But the Nefesh Bahamut is constantly growing, and its thirst and its desire for everything to keep it alive grows. And as it graduates from the school of survival, it enters the school of more than just survival. Eventually, it enters the graduating year called the year of gluttony. That is a person who has had no self-control and has not bothered to consider their position and has just allowed themselves to be led by their inner side of the Nefesh Bahamut, the animal side. And we can actually see what the state after gluttony, and when I say gluttony, I don't mean a glutton by someone who just eats a lot one day. I'm talking about someone who is so self-consumed and everything in their life is about them. And all they do is eat and satisfy their carnal pleasure. It enters into one last stage, the worst possible stage, and that's the stage of abuse. And the stage of abuse could be in any way. It could be the abuse of food. It could be the abuse in a relationship, or not even in a relationship, but just the abuse of another person. Whether that abuse is sexual abuse or mental abuse or emotional abuse. It's complete disregard for the other to a point that the person has now entered into a state that they probably couldn't even regulate and govern themselves. They're going to need someone else to govern them, which is why criminals eventually get tossed into the system of rehabilitation, which we've decided to call jail. And tonight's not the night to explore my opinions on the prison system here. But we can see that at a certain point where, and I'll just use men for example, because I know men don't take this the wrong way, but we can see the example of a man who does rape a woman. He's living at that point that he just says, it's my right, I can do what I want. And whether he can or can't justify it is irrelevant. He goes down that lane, chasing that girl, and eventually does what he does because he needed to. He wanted to. She was asking for it. However you want to put it, he had no moral compass, had no values, had nothing internally to govern himself. And that is the Nefesh Bahamut that is no longer just an animal, it has turned into a beast, and it has completely consumed the person. We all have one of these in us, which means we all have the potential to just go right off the deep end. But because we naturally and instinctively do have a Nefesh Elokis, and we do allow it to speak, and we haven't blocked it out, because it does get messages through the subconscious into the conscious, we do actually live a life of constant friction between the two. They are forever at odds with each other. Ultimately, the goal in life is for the Nefesh Elokis not to destroy the Nefesh Bahamut. It's not for our high conscious side to destroy the beast in us, but rather to completely convert it and govern it. To completely take it and say, you are this wild engine. I could do so much with you if I could just control you completely. So imagine your higher conscious self, your better side was driven, motivated to act and do. That would be the Nefesh Elokis conquering the Nefesh Bahamut. That's a major goal. Let's just go back a step though. The reason why change is difficult is because we do live and we feed our Nefesh Bahamut. We're hungry, we eat. And we don't really ask about, well, what's wrong with that? We just do. And we do what we want within a set of laws. But because we're not aware of it, we've gone 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years kind of just doing what we want, rejecting certain elements of authority. And this is where the ego kicks in, and we all have this little voice inside us that says, well, who are you to really tell me that? And therefore, if it doesn't make sense to us on the spot, we justify by saying, who are you? Which is really code for, I am better than you, and if I don't accept. Now, to a degree, we do that. And that's why often someone will say, a teacher will say, a parent will say, a member of society will say, a government person will say, you really shouldn't be doing that. And because of that, you don't really understand what is so tragic about doing this, that, or the other. You say, well, who are you to tell me that? So take the street artist who genuinely believes that the spray can is his or her expression, just like the paintbrush was Picasso's. And the policeman says, you really shouldn't be doing that. You just say, well, you have no appreciation for art, my friend. You're the inferior person in this discussion, not me, and therefore I can do that. We all do that. When someone says, you really shouldn't be eating that, it's like, please get a life. I can eat whatever I want. And therefore we pop that extra piece of chocolate, or we eat that next tube of Pringles. And we just eat things. We do things because we want to, and we always do things because we want to. But because we've got laws and we're self-respecting, we don't go too far. But by and large, we do what we want to do. And therefore, when we start wanting to make a change, we've got this battle inside us. So you say, no more, I'm not eating this anymore. And the Nefesh Abama says, like, what? But you love chocolate. I love chocolate. We love chocolate. Say, no, your higher conscious self says, no, really shouldn't be eating chocolate. And the Nefesh Abama says, you really should be eating chocolate. It's a comfort food. It makes you feel good. And that's why, for a day, our higher conscious self says, no, we're not eating. And I've got this mind over body power. I've got this mind over emotion. I'm not eating. And then the next day you have a shocking day and you break down crying and there's nothing else that will come for you. And the Nefesh Abama says, come, eat some chocolate. It'll make you feel better. And that's our struggle. Nefesh Abamis comes in other ways. Nefesh Abamis comes 6 o'clock in the morning. You want to sleep. Higher conscious says, it'll be so good. You're going to live another 4 hours today because you're going to be jogging, you're going to be running. And the Nefesh Abamis says, yeah, you're obviously not aware of my sleep patterns and the body's need for sleep. And 6 o'clock, when it's cold and wet, is not exactly an inspirational time to be giving up sleep. Nefesh Abamis isn't wrong. But Nefesh Abamis is that side that says, you've never done this, and you do know that my way is a proven way that works for you. What are you reading those articles about getting up? And I know I'm trivializing it, almost turning it into a cartoon, but guess what? That is what our life is. It's a cartoon. But we just turn it into a very sophisticated adult movie. But I've just highlighted how stupid we sometimes are. People who smoke. I don't mean to attack people who smoke, but I'm going to. People who smoke are stupid. With everything we've read, it's not like the marijuana argument where there's a whole lobby that says, no, really, marijuana is excellent for you. It's just the government who's misrepresenting. We know tobacco and what goes into a cigarette with all those chemicals, you can't even say it's all organic. It is not all organic. Tar is not organic. Nothing in that thing is good for you. And yet we say, no, it is good because it calms me down, it makes me a better human being, or blah, blah, blah. We make up all this pseudoscience that suits us. And that's the Nefesh Abam is saying the status quo should not be changed because it never has been a problem. And therefore we don't think about the future. The Nefesh Abamis is not a forward-thinking being because it's about living now. The Nefesh Abamis doesn't, if you look at the jungle, there's a reason why the animals never came up with the fridge, and it's not because evolution didn't allow them to develop that part of their brain. It's because they've never needed a fridge. Hungry, go hunt. Finished eating, leave it to the jackals. You don't really see, there is a bit of storing in the animal kingdom, but nowhere near as much as we store. Coles stores your fruit and veggies for like a year. You don't have monkeys going, quick, bananas, into the fridge, for a year, we'll never have to climb a tree again. That's not what happens. The Nefesh Abamis doesn't operate like that. It lives in the here and now. And the here and now is what's going to get you to the next second. not planning for the future. If I live now, I live another day. I don't live now, I don't live another day. So that's why spiritually we are resistant to change, because change threatens our existence. It's usually the things that you want to change are not, you don't wake up one day and say, I think I want to start eating 2 burgers instead of 1. And if you do, the Nefesh Bahamis might kick in and say, that's really not very healthy. And therefore we will have resistance in a healthy way, because the Nefesh Bahamis isn't a complete glutton. It just is looking to maintain the status quo because it reckons that is what is healthy by its standards for us in where we are. So that is why it's difficult. The most popular areas of failure that I've discovered, both researching tonight and also in the 7 years of running Spiritgrow, in my father's 30 years of traveling, and in all the articles we've all read, we probably could actually guess what the 3 big areas of failure are. Food and health is one area of failure that we really struggle to make changes. Failure being that we make a change and then don't carry through. And that's why we celebrate the people that do. How many people know someone who had cancer, God forbid, and you're just so impressed how they completely, holistically responded and just changed everything. And you just say, I wish I had that staying power like they do. Well, and then we make up this excuse, well, when you get cancer, they do that. As if they had a good kick in the butt, but we don't have a good one, so therefore we can't change. It's almost like you need a shock value in order to really change. And I'm going to actually show you that's actually not true. Plenty of people have shocks in their lives and it doesn't do anything, as we're going to get there. But food and health is something that we probably day by day by day decide we're going to change, if not now, tomorrow. And it's very, very hard. And those of you who have done it, congratulations, because Western society is not kitted out and geared up and ready to make major health changes. We're very, very responsive in our society, very responsive. We're not very preventative. So when we've hit rock bottom or when we've hit the wall, we'll change. Or society will say, this is a bit out of control, we've got to change. But we don't have this, that's why Jamie Oliver gets so many fans. Jamie Oliver is so exciting because he's trying to teach health before you get unhealthy. It's like, he's so smart. And yet, there's no money in preventative health. So Professor Mark Cohen, who comes and lectures here, was here last year speaking. He was here this year, but last year he spoke about some research he was doing and the difficulties in raising funds for it could be life-changing research. But the problem is no one wants to invest in preventative health because you can't sell preventative health. You can only sell health that is responsive. You're sick, take this. If I stop the sickness, there's no money to be made. And he just spoke about the major challenge that in general the preventative health world has. It's a lot harder to market it. Of course, there is money being dished out, but nowhere near the same as if you think from an economic point of view that, let's say, pharmaceuticals, etc., involved in more developing, which is not a blight. They're not evil, the pharmaceuticals. But I'm just showing you it's a lot easier for us to comprehend. We need to respond to a crisis than try to offset a crisis, which is why when there's a world crisis, there's an outpouring of money to save all the people that have just been hit by a flood, a hurricane, an earthquake, whatever. But if you said, I'm fundraising to try to move a village away from an area that might be prone to flooding, you see how many hits you get, how many hundreds of millions of dollars you raise because you're trying to save an African village from future damage. So food and health, relationships. Relationships is a real struggle. Relationships is a real area that people try, and some people are successful, and other people really find it difficult. They'll make changes and they slip. I know this, I've watched this firsthand. I've got a sister who's divorced and happily remarried, but watching a prolonged divorce process, you get an insight. Without taking sides, you get an insight how there are really two different human beings here, and they genuinely see things very, very differently. We say there's always another side to the story. 100% there's another side to the story. It doesn't make the other side right and one side wrong, but both actually think they're right. Both genuinely, usually think they're right. Sometimes people come around and say, that really wasn't right, but they can't make it work. So it's nobody's right, nobody's wrong, but what we're highlighting is that in a relationship, there is very much a focus on me as an entity, and relationships are actually really, really difficult. How many people have had friends and lost friends, had business partners and lost them? And it's not about who's right and wrong here. It's the fact that it does happen. And so often people resolve to change, and it's short-lived. Because, as we're going to talk about, sometimes the things that are being addressed in that change are not necessarily things that need to be addressed, but rather they're symptomatic and the symptoms are being addressed. And then the hardest and the most common, I believe, and I have this, not to say that I don't have the others, is how many people just want to change their life? How many people just say, I just want to change my life. I'm not finding fulfillment, or you've walked through a Japanese garden, and you just say, yeah, this is what I want. I want to just sit and meditate. I don't want the chaos of the world anymore. I want this new change in my life. Complete change of pace. But how? And what? And then you start doing things, and then you lose yourself into the rat race. How many times have you said to yourself, you know what? Really, I'm working so hard to make money, to spend the money on these things, and then I'm making money, and the money's not coming fast enough, and I'm becoming a slave to the money train, I'm becoming a slave to my work, I'm taking charge. Work is not going to run my life. And for a few days, we run the work, whatever work is. We are in charge. And then slowly, work and life takes over, and we become a carriage in life's train instead of being the train of life. I think that's something that probably every single person in this room can relate to, because statistically we're all there. We all would like to have a better quality life. I just read, I hope I don't offend anyone with this. There was an article in the Psychology magazine. It's an Australia-wide magazine. And the article was about how, we always get taught money doesn't buy happiness. Apparently it does. Apparently that little saying is false. Money does buy happiness. Not directly does it buy happiness, but it buys you the lifestyle in which you can be happy. Because if we're talking about wanting to be able to create space, well, someone who's extremely flush actually could create that and say, well, I'm quite content to just have lots of this money here, and therefore I can take Monday, Tuesday off for meditation, check in Wednesday, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, continue with my off time. You can buy that space for yourself. Not everyone does. So it's not that money will buy you happiness, but money can buy happiness, which was really, really interesting. But the rest of us, really a struggle. We can't just stop working saying, no, I've had an epiphany, I've got a high spiritual place in this world, or I just want to sit and take off, because suddenly when the bank comes calling saying about that mortgage, if you say, no, we're all one, and the bank manager says, you are not one with me, my friend, your house will be one with me if you don't make the next payment. And suddenly you've got to go back to work and work a lot harder, and as you're working a lot harder, there's no time for meditation and spirituality, and suddenly you're back on that hamster wheel. So these are areas that we really try and don't seem to be able to make long-term changes. And if there are people in this room that have, again, congratulations, you are what I would call a master of sorts. And I'm sure we could actually all identify in our lives. And later in the series, we're going to actually explore moments of success. Because you could come out right now and say, oh my God, he's kind of doomed us all to failure. We're never going to succeed. And this whole course is how we can succeed, but actually identifying how many times in our life we have succeeded. But I'm highlighting areas that we do struggle, and we need to take a bit of a paradigm shift, take a bit of a change of how we're looking at life before we start saying what we want to change. We've got to look at this concept of change. So there are two different ways, inspirations to change. And I'm going to give them Aramaic words. These come from Kabbalistic writings. One is iteruta dilatata. Isarusa dilasata. It is literally translated as an arousal from below. Isrusa de la'ela, an arousal from upon high. Basically, one is internal and one is external. One is in our control and one is out of our control. This is in regards to spiritual arousal. You have this moment of just wanting spiritual change, and there are different times in the day, in the calendar, in the year where our souls become. If the soul is a flame, then it flares up, and suddenly its heat and its its energy, its message goes through our subconscious and enters into our conscious. Other times it's just trying, but it's too weak, and therefore we don't chap. And sometimes you have this inspiration, sometimes you don't. And sometimes externally we become inspired, and sometimes we don't. And these are spiritual flare-ups in the world that are constantly there. And why they take place and how they take place is not for tonight. But I want to trivialize them into very, very simple concepts. One is a moment of inspiration that we experience inside of us, and the other is something that's forced on us. And what I want to first talk about, I'm not sure which one I want to do first. I want to talk about Isrusa de la'ela first, because you can't control it. Isrusa de la'ela is where something external happens. So I'm going to give you a very, very shocking example, and I'm not saying this was an Isrusa de la'ela, but I am going to use it as an example of an external factor that changed a lot of things. September 11th, 2001, 2 aeroplanes flew into the Twin Towers. And then another airplane was, I think, shot down, and then another airplane went down into the Pentagon. I just want to focus on the Twin Towers because that was the most impacting of all the crashes. Everyone's rushing to work. It's in the morning, and 2 planes go in, and these 2 towers come crumbling down with thousands of people dead. Many people, I'm talking about final, many dead, many injured, and all sorts of damage done. It was an absolute man-made tragedy that resulted in death. After September 11, the divorce rate in America dropped. Now, we know America is the capital of divorce. It's got an extremely high divorce rate of 45 to 50% of all marriages end up in divorce, which is a very, very high statistic. I think some people report it as higher, but I think that's what it officially is. And it dropped, came plummeting down. And then there was, of course, an increase in births 9 months later, which you could imagine why. And the question is, what happened? I want to give you another example before we discuss what happened. After Hurricane Katrina, which hit New Orleans, divorce rate rocketed. So you can't say, a natural disaster or some sort of disaster brings people together, because after Hurricane Katrina, the divorce rate in New Orleans was so out of control for a couple years before it leveled out. So what happened there? Things happen to us and we respond in different ways. Remember what I said about the aeroplane? When we're on the aeroplane, you watch this sad movie where like someone's daughter is taken hostage and the whole movie's about Denzel Washington trying to get the daughter free, or it's some CIA guy whose wife's being kidnapped and he's hoping she's still alive, or whatever it is, and we just go, oh my God, if that was my loved one, I'd never want to let go of them again. I wish I could be with my loved one right now. I hope this plane doesn't crash. I want to see my loved ones one more time. All sorts of crazy thoughts go through our head as human beings. September 11, a lot of people lost husbands and wives and children. And people started saying, oh my God, I'm so lucky that I've got my loved one. And problems in life really melted away because for a moment it clarified what life is to people. And life is not the money. Life is not the job, and it's not prestige. Life is just having someone else, and that they care for you and you care for them. And after September 11, people in America, and especially, and it spreads because California was a higher divorce rate than the tri-state and New England area. So of course, closer to the epicenter was more impactful because that's where most people were impacted. But people just said, we are so lucky we've got each other. Who cares about money? at least we've got each other. And so divorce rates dropped. There was a new appreciation for the other human in this relationship. Families were close together. And although social work and counseling didn't go down, the nature of psychological help changed. It wasn't the same as bridging relationships. It was coping as a unit. It was very, very, very interesting, the studies that have come out. Hurricane Katrina was completely different. Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans, and we know it caused massive, massive destruction, but it didn't kill so many people. I don't mean to trivialize, only a few people died. It didn't kill so many people. It wiped out a lot of finances. And so what do you do when your money's taken away from you, but your family's still there? So the next day you go, thank God my family's still here, now I've got to rebuild. And nagging spouse, nagging wife or nagging husband says to the other, but where are we going to sleep tonight? Nagging children cry, but we have no food. And what does that do? It causes pressure. And eventually the pressure cooker goes off and it turns into, well, what do you want me to do about it? What do you want me to do about it? And one more, what do you want me to do about it makes the other one say, stop talking to me like that. What do you want me to do about it? Stop talking to me like that. What do you want me to do about it? And it's like, I'm out of here. That's what happened after Hurricane Katrina. Because people's money was taken from them, but they weren't given a moment to glimpse of what the true value was. Although this was an external thing that could bring people together, and it did bring a lot of people together, people rallied to help the citizens of New Orleans and America. People did rally, but the people themselves were put under so much pressure that it could have gone either way, and the pressure cooker led to an increase in divorce. Whereas after September 11, where money was really not important because so many people died, and so many people knew someone that had died, they just said, well, thank God it wasn't us. Thank God it wasn't us. So these are external factors that could go either way. I'm not going to take questions yet. I'll take questions after. These could go either way. But this is not something that the person wakes up. This is a situation that's forced on the person, and then they respond. Isrusa Dila'el is where something external inspires you, and you either will or you won't respond. And you will respond one way, you'll respond another way. But it's external that's been brought onto you. Hurricane Katrina was brought onto people. They responded one way. September 11 was brought on people by other people, admittedly. There is a difference because one is man-made and one is nature-made, but that's not my point here. But we can see they're both externalities, and people respond in different ways. And then you can look for much smaller things. Small things happen in our life. Inspirational things happen in our life, and we either do or we don't seize on them. But what was interesting, where this ends, where after September 11, although divorces did drop, they eventually picked back up. Back to normal, where they should be. Back up. Something didn't last. It's not uncommon that an Isrusa Dila'ela doesn't last. Because it's, in a spiritual term, I don't want anyone walking out going, September 11 was an act that God gave to bring couples together. That's not what it was. I'm using it as an example, and we see a sociological outcome. In Isrusa Dila'ela, this spiritual flare-up that happens, whether we grasp it or not, it's an externality that we somehow have to bring in. And it's a very, very hard thing to process, and therefore it will often be short-lived. That's why God doesn't throw miracles our way all the time, because there's no point to miracles. If we look biblically, the Jews leave Egypt, they cross the sea, one of the most amazing things we're ever going to hear about in history. And what are they doing a few days later? They're going, Moses, we want to kill you. We're going to starve to death. If we would have gone through the splitting of the sea, we never would have thought that we were going to starve to death. If the sea can split, God will bring other miracles. But it doesn't last. Miracles are not that amazing. They're amazing on the spot. It's like a good movie. It's not the best movie ever. Titanic was the best movie ever. Suddenly Avatar's the best movie ever. And Braveheart was the best movie ever. You can't have the best movie ever. There'll always be another best movie because it wears off. No one lives with Titanic and go, Avatar, Titanic. Move on. Move on. And now Avatar, Lion King. Oh, the meaning of the Lion King. Or The Matrix. You see how many amazing movies there were? And you say, no, they were all amazing. No, they weren't. At those times, there was no better movie ever in history. Humphrey Bogart could take a hike for these guys in the Matrix. That was it. So miracles aren't that amazing. They're amazing on the spot. Our goal in life is to have Isserus Dilasata, that we become inspired somewhere within us. And I'll give you an example of how that happens. It happens like this. You go for a walk on a Sunday afternoon, and you're listening to a class, and something just grabs you. The weather was exactly the way it was the week before. Your day probably panned out exactly the way it did the week before, but something's changed. How many of you have just woken up one day and said, I'm not happy? Not I'm depressed, I'm just not happy. I'm not happy with the situation. I'm not happy. And it sits on your head, I'm not happy. It's not that I'm unhappy with work. And this often, people might call this a midlife crisis. And it's funny when people have their midlife. Some people have their midlife very early in life. And you say, oh my God, you're only going to live till 40 because you had your midlife crisis at 20. That you just wake up and say, what is the meaning? And the midlife crisis gets this weird negative label because the person has no idea what to do with these feelings. And therefore they channel it in different directions. So some will buy a pink Porsche. And others will just, that's it, they go to Tibet. Others will become ultra-Orthodox. And we just go, oh my God, what is wrong with these people? Ultra-Orthodox, that's what you're doing with your midlife crisis? And what do? We cover for them. They're going through a bit of a phase. Why not say, that is amazing that you've seen the light? Because it kind of puts us off, and it's not just ultra-orthodoxy. I'm just using that as an example because that happens in the Jewish community, that people just suddenly become religious. People know someone who's got a son or a daughter that became religious, and it's like, it was always going to happen. We always saw he was always a bit different. He was always a bit different with that knowing, like, we're normal because nothing rocks our boat. That person was always susceptible to whatever. He was always like that. She was always like that. And I'm not saying that everyone that changes drastically in their life is in a positive mindset, but I am going to make the safe assumption that most people that go through change are gutsy, ballsy people who have decided to buck the trend and think for themselves. And we all have these moments and we're not sure what to do with it. That we just wake up and we say we're not happy. That is an Isserus Dilasata. And it can happen multiple times in life. It does happen multiple times because it's coming from our Nefesh Elokis, remember, that's just trying to get a message through. There's something more in life. And one day the Nefesh Bahamis is off guard and the message comes through and we consciously think, what the hell am I doing? In Isserus, now let me give you a more coarse Isserus Dilaela, a higher spiritual thing. There's a wedding coming up and you've got to fit into a dress. You didn't get engaged, someone else got engaged, but you need to fit into a dress. That's been forced on you. Then you have the person that wakes up one day and just says, I'm not happy with this. I'm going to make a change. There's no wedding coming up, there's no dress that needs to be fit into, there's no suit, there's no pants, there's nothing. It's just, I'm not happy. I'm not feeling healthy. And I think most people in this room have had that, where you just woken up one day saying, I'm not feeling healthy. I want to change this. This is not good. And that can be in a relationship. How many times have you turned to a loved one or a friend or someone said, I want to have a talk. I'm not happy with where things are. God forbid, I'm not saying I'm leaving or you're leaving, nothing's changing, but I want us to change. And you have this moment, and sometimes you know what to do with it, and sometimes you don't. These are Isserus Dilaelas and Dilasatas that happen all the time in our life. So let's just work with the Isserus Dilasata. You have it. That is the beginning of the change process. So you have this feeling, I just want to change. You've got to seize it at that moment, but you can't jump off the deep end. And that's where we often go wrong. We jump off the deep end. We just go nuts. We spend like $5,000 online buying all sorts of supplements and things. Or we do silly things like, I've done this many times. Tell me if you've ever done this. So I get to New York every year or two. I go to different conferences and things. And or I go on my spiritual journey, as I mentioned earlier. And when I'm in New York, I like to do a bit of shopping because everything's cheap in New York. I had to buy, my brother-in-law, Rachel's brother, got married 3 weeks ago. I had to buy a pair of pants here. I just went from one shop to the next because I refused to pay what they were asking me for pants. In New York, I buy 3 pairs of pants for that price. And they're much better quality brand name pants in New York. What's wrong with this country? But I had to do it. So I'm in New York, and you go shopping, and how many times do you see a piece, an item, you just love it, and you try it on, and it's just a little too tight. You go, yeah, I'll just lose weight, and then it'll be fine. How many people have spent $50, $100, $150 saying, it'll be fine. In a few weeks, I'm going to be back to normal. I'll fit in. I've got a collection of pants that I've never worn. And the problem is I can't wear them now because they're completely out of date, fashion-wise. But because it wasn't that I was like massive and these pants were way skinny. It's just that they were a little tight, and I knew in my head that I was planning on losing weight anyway, so I did. Now, if you have no idea what I'm talking about, there are millions of people out there that do know what I'm talking about because there are always articles about these sorts of stupid forms of buying. So when we have this moment of change, it's not go out and shop for the end. We have a moment of change. We have a moment of clarity. We have to get a vision. Let's say I'm not happy with where life is. Well, what do I want? What do I want my life to be? Do I want more stillness, more silence, more quiet? Do I want happier? Do I want sadder? Do I want more emotion, less? What is it that I want? Do I want to feel healthier? What is it that I'm chasing? Not just that I'm not happy. Fine. Good. Now, what do you want to do with this feeling? Get an image. In business, that's called your mission or your vision, whatever. Get there. Understand what your finished product is going to semi-look like. I'm not into that you need to have everything down pat. The Chachma and Binah. The Chachma was, I've had this epiphany. Binah is start developing it. What is it that I want to change? And not just what is it that I want to change, where do I want to be? Not do I want to lose 5 kilos, do I want to lose 10 kilos? That's all part of the process. I want to look skinnier. I want to feel more energized. I want to have made something. I would like to have a partner. I'd like to, whatever it is, know what it is. And then you start the process of getting there. And there are here a number of tips for what must always be done in the process of change and what you must be doing even if you're not inspired to change. And it comes back to the Nefesh Bahamis. Nefesh Bahamis does not like when we just do things without explaining them to him or her. The Nefesh Bahamis doesn't like spontaneous behavior. Nefesh Bahamis does not like Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is an excellent example. You're going to fast. And the Nefesh Bahamis is like, what? What do you mean you're going to fast? You're not religious. It's like, no, Yom Kippur I fast. Now my Nefesh Bahamis, and you'll say, Menachem, please. My Nefesh Bahamis, guess what it says on Yom Kippur? Because I'm very frum. What does my Nefesh Bahamis say? It says, you are so bloody hungry. 9:30 at night, on the night of Kol Nidre, I'm already hungry. So either there's something seriously wrong with my Nefesh Bahamis, or I'm not a religious Jew. There's something wrong. Surely the religious Jew who fasted all his life and fasts there are so many fast days during the year, you should be used to it by now. But no, I seem to get as hungry as everyone else on Yom Kippur. Somehow my Nefesh Bahamis doesn't see the good in fasting. And it has not been convinced about this. I can say, but holy day, I've learned all the stuff, I'm meditating, I'm spiritual. Nefesh Bahamis says, yeah, but you know full well that you're going to die if you don't eat. You're going to get a very dry throat if you don't drink. Just drink, you're thirsty. And therefore, you do get thirsty. The day you don't get thirsty is the day the Nefesh Bahamis says, I don't want to drink. I understand the value spiritually of this day, and I don't want to upset that beautiful spiritual equilibrium. Until that happens, though, our Nefesh Bahamis is saying, I'm hungry, I'm thirsty on Yom Kippur. And so there is another Aramaic word, Isrusadullah Sat is Aramaic, Isrusadullah El is Aramaic. I've got a new Aramaic word, which we're going to learn tonight, and it's called iskafia. Iskafia means to hold oneself back. It's to practice self-control. Now, the fact that we have to say before we talk about self-control, practice self-control, indicates how serious self-control is and how challenging it is. Because self-control is like this. You've been to a beautiful restaurant. You had entree. You had main. You ordered dessert. I go out with Rachel, so let's say we order 2 desserts, and she doesn't finish her dessert. I've finished my dessert. I've got a fork in my hand. She's got a little, tiny, small piece of self-sourcing chocolate cake. I paid for it. Just eat it. Self-control is that moment that although I want to, I'm going to say no to myself. Self-control is that moment. Self-control may not be about a crumb of self-sourcing chocolate cake. Self-control could be you go to a restaurant and you say, I don't need entree. I know I'm going to have an unbelievable main course. Self-control isn't, I'm stopping everything. That's stupidity. It's another S word. Self-control is that I'm just going to cut back on one little thing. Why? Because I can. Because I have that inner strength. Self-control isn't always about holding back. Self-control could be about getting up 5 minutes earlier. So one of the things I actually used to do after fast days, I think I still sometimes do it, is the moment the fast is out, you're ready to go. Like the moment the fast is out, you're like, okay, got to eat now. The end of Yom Kippur, it's like, where's the food? People get so neurotic, like the chazan's going a bit long. Yom Kippur is over, my friend. I've got people coming to my house. I've got to go. Come on, there's food to be eaten. You are keeping me from eating another minute. Self-control is, I can survive another 5 minutes. Self-control is the ability to be able to say, I can go without, or I'm going to do something even though I don't want to. Self-control means I'm controlling myself to do something that my brain is telling me is what I should do. Self-control is when I can't be bothered getting out of my in the cold rain out of my car to help someone else. Not an old lady. I'm not going to romanticize this. Imagine you're in the Coles parking lot, in the car park, and you've loaded your stuff into the car, and you see there's a lady who's, I'm using lady because I look like this, because I'm a male, but you could be anyone, and you just see someone who has a lot more stuff, and they're 2 cars away, and it's raining. They didn't ask you to come help them, but how cool would it be if you actually walked in the cold, in the wet, and just helped them put 2 cars in, two bags in their car. And of course you do with the right body language that he or she doesn't think you're about to come and rape or rob them or whatever it is. I did a workshop 2 weeks ago, a week and a half ago, at a company on stress and finding meaning in work. And one of the things was I told them how practice niceness on checkout checks, because they're easy. They're right there. It's not like they're going anywhere, and no one's ever nice to them. So just practice being nice to them. And because this is part of a workshop we did at work, was how to start being nice to people and being genuinely nice. I said, just walk up to a checkout chick, and while she's going blip, 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 just go, how are you? How's the day going? How have the customers been? Have people been absolute write-offs? And get her to talk, or him to talk. And then finish by saying, I really like what you've done with your hair. Just find something that you really like about them and tell them that you like that about them. Because I guarantee you no one else is doing it. And so I get this email on Friday, right before Shabbos, from someone that actually said, I took your advice on board, and he writes to me, he's a middle-aged guy, and he asked the checkout chick how she is, and the first response was, how old are you? So I wrote back, it's not her, it's not you. You might need to try a different line of questioning, or maybe don't be so flattering, but just be something a bit more. Find your entry point. Maybe it just didn't seem to. Anyway, so iskafia is self-control.
Midlife crisis.
What?
Was he before?
According to her, he was on the midlife crisis. See, iskafia is this moment of self-control. And we should be practicing self-control even when we don't need to. Just to always, because that's what keeps the nefesh habahamis in check. It's like a dog. It's like a pet. It's not allowed to just do everything. And sometimes we actually do things and stop the pet or encourage the pet to do things even if it's not required right now, just to ensure there's an understanding of who is in charge of who here. Who is running the show over here? And the nefesh habahamis should never feel, that side of us should never feel that it is in charge of us. We must always know that we can do what we want when we want to in regards to ourselves, because we can, because we have that strength. Unfortunately, society often is very, very weak to themselves. We find it very, very hard to cut back. We find it very, very hard to change what we want because we've always given in to ourselves. And what Kabbala and what Chassidut demands is that we practice iskafia. So let me continue now with my original story. I'm in New York and I meet up with one of the teachers who I'm listening to the classes of. And I told him that although I'm having this spiritually emotional high and I'm loving it, I'm finding it's not impacting me across the board. There's still some things that I don't care about in Judaism. Like big, little, not important, but just like I'm just not driven to make sure I'm careful about these things. And that bothers me. I'm bothered that I'm not bothered, which is a good thing. It's good to be bothered when you're not bothered. And he says, you need to practice, not iskaf, he says something else, Kabbala soul. Do things just because that's what you're meant to do. That's what you're meant to. And because right now you're living on this wave of inspiration, but where the areas that the inspiration doesn't go, you're not inspired. And we as human beings do not live on inspiration. We use inspiration. We milk inspiration. Inspiration is a great kick in the tuchus. Inspiration is great kinetic energy. It's great. It helps, but it's not everything. At the end of the day, the grind is what's going to get us through life. And if you're living on inspiration, when the day comes that you need to put in the grind, you're not going to be ready. Your machinery is not well oiled. You're going to run out of inspiration one day, he says. And then you're going to be back to where you were because you haven't been practicing Kabbala Soul, or Iskafi, which is your backup plan that should inspiration go, the machine is still operating. And that was really, really important that he told me that. Iskafi is what allows us to make change even when change is hard. It's easy to begin a change process when we're inspired. It's hard to maintain the inspiration. So I'm saying that Iskafi is required in order to maintain the change that we want to have. Because let's say we're losing weight to fit into a dress or into a suit. So fine, at that moment, I'm able to. But what happens once I've worn that dress or when I've worn that suit? We blow up again because the drive has been taken away. But that's so foolish. We were on such a healthy, but we just lost all inspiration. It's like, I know, I want to be healthy, but there's nothing really keeping me. However, if there were other areas that we were actually really controlling our behavior and controlling certain aspects and pushing ourselves to do things just because we can push ourselves to do it, we would actually find that when we're challenged in another way, we'd have the strength to keep on going until a new inspiration comes. And as I said, there's always an inspiration coming. We just have to get ourselves from inspiration to inspiration. That is through Kabbala Soul and Iskafia. That is through that. Just controlling the Nefesh Bahamis so the Nefesh Bahamis can never rear its head and say, I'm in charge. No, our higher conscious self is always in charge. Of course I know you're going to run away with me many times, but I'm still going to put my foot down when I can. It's so important. It's not about winning every battle, but it's making sure we do win some. And these are the battles. And it's no point beating a child in a game of chess. You've got to be able to beat someone of your own type. So when you're inspired, big whoop. You've got to also make sure we've got these other moments. How long does change take? There are many, many books and articles and everything, and it seems quite unanimous. Change takes around 30 days. Habits kick in over a 30-day period, and habits take around 30 days to break. There have been a lot of studies on this. This is not a Hasidic Kabbalistic concept of 30. That's just science right there. We've got to, and that's where Skafi comes in. Skafi is what allows us to have stamina. So you wake up one day, you go, that's it, I'm going jogging tomorrow morning. And so you get up tomorrow at 6 o'clock, even though you went to bed at 12. And you get up and run and you feel good. And the next morning you do it again and you feel good. The next morning you know you're going to feel good. But the thing is you feel pretty good in bed right now as well. And so it starts receding. And so you hit snooze. You get up at 6:05. And this I found in my changes. I found that the Nefesh Bahamis has another little... There's a guy that rides on the Nefesh Bahamis. There's the Nefesh Elokis, Nefesh Bahamis, and then there's another side to us, the Yetzer Hara and the Yetzer Tov, the will to do good and the will to do what's wrong. The Yetzer Hara is not... It's not two Jiminy Crickets, not the little Lucifer and a little angel. The Yetzer Hara just is always telling you the Nefesh Bahamis is always right. The Yetzer Tov says the higher consciousness is always right. They've got their messages, but then you've got your consciousness of your consciousness, which is totally trippy. The Yetzer Hara, the Nefesh Bahamis is an animal. The Nefesh Bahamis just wants, if the Nefesh Bahamis could have its day, it today would have you overeating, it would have men behaving like absolutely, I couldn't even say what it would have us doing. It would turn us into raw animal cavemen. That's what we'd be. But we can control that. The Yetzer Hara is the part that regulates, and the Yetzer Tov helps regulate, and they regulate against each other. And this is how the Yetzer Hara operates. This is real deal. And I know everyone's been here. So I get up and I learn at 6 o'clock in the morning. So I'm downstairs at 6. And if you've created a habit of doing this for months, you're not going to one day say, can't be stuffed. Doesn't happen. The Yetzer Hara is smart. The Yetzer Hara is shrewd. The Yetzer Hara knows exactly what it's doing. And so what the Yetzer Hara does is, your alarm rings and the Yetzer Hara says, you love learning. Make sure you get up in 5 minutes. Because no one ever died pushing their day off by 5 minutes. The Yetzer Hara doesn't say, you're tired, don't worry. The Yetzer Hara knows where you're at. The Yetzer Hara doesn't try to get you to do things that don't make any sense. It just gets you to do things that make a little bit of sense. And that's where we hit the snooze. And then a few days later, and I'm getting up a few minutes late than I used to. And then the Yetzer Hara, when the alarm goes, says, you see, you're still getting your learning done. A few more minutes. And now I'm sleeping in for 15 minutes. And then one day it said, you went to bed 1 in the morning, you're not going to learn effectively. What you should do is learn this afternoon. It doesn't tell me don't learn. It doesn't say learning is bad for me. It just says we'll learn later in the day, and it justifies it. And the Yetzer Hara, and I'm talking in third person because it really is. There are different thoughts that go on in our mind every morning when the alarm goes. There's a part of us that says, get up, get up, get up. There's another part of us that says, no, stay in bed, warm bed, warm bed, warm bed. There's another part that says, work, work, work. There's another part that sends the anxiety jolts. There's another part that says, stuff the anxiety. And everyone has these different voices that talk to them, and they're not madman voices, they're different sides to us operating at the same time. And so the Yetzer Hara doesn't say, give it up. The Yetzer Hara just postpones things, delays things, talks you through, it rationalizes how your life could be according to the Nefesh Bahamis' game. And we all do that. We cover for ourselves. I went to bed late, I'll do it later. Procrastination, all these things are elements of the Yetzer Hara. And so when going through change, I make my change, and then the Yetzer Hara doesn't say, stuff the change. It doesn't say, eat whatever you want. It just says, what's a little square of chocolate going to do already? Nothing. It won't do anything. And it's probably 100% right that on that day it won't do anything. But once you break, the next day it says, you see, nothing happened. Have a cookie. And then it starts saying things like, no more cookies, healthy now, you're really thirsty, you know Solo tastes delicious. It's not Coke. It's not going to get you to drink Coke. But Solo, how bad could Solo be? So you have a drink of Solo. Did anything happen? And over time, the Yetzer Hara breaks you down. And I watched that happen over a month of my life, just in my journey there, where it said to me, you're under a lot of stress. Of course you're going to get back to the learning, but not today. You're suffering from anxiety. You've got to deal with work. You've got to deal with other things. And that's what happens in our life. We justify our negative changes or our lapses in our motivation. 30 days is what creates the habit that the Yetzer Hara doesn't bother attacking too much. But that 30 days is not going to be a wave of 30 days of inspiration. There is inspiration that will begin the 30 days, but it's Kabbala soul and iskafia and the consciousness of all these different elements that are going on inside of our head that actually get us through the 30 days until it eventually becomes a habit. And habits develop over this 30-day period. If you want to stop looking at, one of my next targets in my life is to stop having my mobile phone on me all the time. I'm going to stop. That means at night, at home, it won't come into my bedroom, of course. It does now. My phone is one of the last things I say goodnight to. Sometimes it's Rachel, sometimes it's my phone. Sometimes I SMS her goodnight. No, I'm joking. Never that bad. But it's my next thing. And I know that it's not going to be easy. But after 30 days, you kind of rid yourself of it, that you don't need to keep doing it. That's what the science tells us. So you've got to realize you're in the long haul. You've got to be aware that it's going to take a bit of work. So where to from here? We've spoken about a lot of things. The reason why I spoke about all these things and not just jump into do it for 30 days is because if you do anything for 30 days, it's not going to work. It may work. But according to our teachings, if we understand what's going on in our head, we can start putting colors and highlighting the different things going on. So I can say, no, I consciously am not listening to that side of me. I am consciously listening to this. And there's a sense of achievement when you start saying, ha, I beat myself, and I can see where I beat myself. This is like Rachel saying to me, I've noticed that you've been improving. I noticed that you're getting better. When we can say that to ourselves, that is even better when we can start chalking up successes and seeing, I'm beating this, I'm beating it. I haven't beaten it, I am beating it. I'm getting over the struggle, I'm creating change in my life. I'm achieving new things. And I can, after one goal, I can set another goal. Not just of losing 5 kilos and my next goal is lose another 5 kilos. I'm feeling good. Now I want to start doing something else, which is why people who are really into exercise or really into their health, they just go from one thing to another. It's like they're running one marathon and then another marathon, and then they're doing the tough mudder, which I don't think you can go beyond the tough mudder. They're just going from one thing to the next because they're looking for new challenges, but this is called conversion, and that's what we want to reach. Conversion is where it's no longer a struggle, but the struggle is now within the growth, not maintaining the growth. What we want to get to is that it completely consumes us. Not that I look at a piece of chocolate and I struggle. What I want to get myself to is a point that it's not about the chocolate. I hate chocolate. It's like the diabetic who discovers they're diabetic one day says, I hate chocolate. Yesterday you loved chocolate, today not. Why? Because yesterday I saw chocolate, I saw sweetness. Now when I see chocolate, I see death. It's quite simple. It's quite simple. It all changed because I completely converted my thinking. I converted my perception on life. And that's what I wanted. And that's what I continue to want. I don't want to know what I'm talking about. I want to emotionally feel it. I want that my mind is now controlling my emotions. And that's what we're working towards. And that's why people find it odd when someone becomes religious, of any religion. It's like, why? Because once they've tasted and they're on this journey, it doesn't just become a new outlook in one specific area, it consumes them. It's like a person who really gets into their health. I have a number of friends, we know a number of people who have suffered from cancer and beaten cancer and survived, and Baruch Hashem are healthy, and they haven't, and the changes they made in their life are now permanent. Not because this was what got them through cancer, but because they have genuinely discovered that this is unhealthy. Why would they want that in their life? They're so much happier with what their life is now. It's not about returning back. It's now the journey within the journey. And that's what we're working towards. Never be satisfied that I've now fit in the dress. Because if we're satisfied that we fit in the dress, we're going to fit out of that dress very quickly. So here's one more little tip. That's the end. But here's a cool tip of something that I just learned. Let me see if I've got his name here. He is a German professor, Peter Gollwitzer. He's a German professor in University of New York. And he did a number of studies in the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and today. It sounds like a music pop channel. But he did a number of studies. And this is so true. Oh my God. When you have a good idea, When you have an inspiration that you want to change something, don't tell anyone about it. Peter Goldwitzer says that and this is what he found, that when you do actually tell people about your great idea, a chemical change happens in your body to the point that your brain processes your good idea as an achievement, as if you've actually done it. Which is why you can have this awesome idea and it's driving you, and then you share it with someone, and within a few days, it's gone. It's like, what happened to your good idea? No, it's gone. Got a new good idea. But people who sit on their idea and have their goal and start working towards it, as long as it's inside you, it burns you. And you know you haven't achieved it. Once you say it and someone says, oh my God, what a great idea, that's a validation that your brain says, oh my God, you're so successful, I can't believe you managed to pull that off. That's what the brain hears. When the person says, what a great idea, you actually heard, well done, congratulations, what an unbelievable success. So we must keep our thoughts to ourselves. And you say, no, I've got to share it, that way they keep me in check. He says, no, you don't need to share it with people to keep you in check. You need to keep yourself in check. Unless it's something that you genuinely need someone else for, such as if you're a junkie, you're a druggie, you need outside assistance. You can't just kick these habits. I mean, ultimately, you could, but if you're part of that 0.00001 that has that mental ability to be able to do that, great. But everyone else, we need assistance, whether it's psychiatrists or whether it's other drugs or it's a detox and psychological support. Then you need to open up and share your idea with someone else who's going to give you the kick to keep going every time you fall over. But the things that we're not talking about addictions, we're just talking about behavioral changes. We're talking about mental positioning. We're talking about changing the way we think that we can do ourselves. And if we have the Kabbala, and we have the Chassidut, and we have the understanding of self, then we have all the different players that live inside our head and our heart at bay, and we know exactly what's happening. The rest of this course is going to be about exploring meditations. On Wednesday night, I'm running a meditation session, which is, what is the thought process when I wake up? There's a beautiful, beautiful Yiddish phrase. The Yiddish phrase is morgen wird sein anders, that tomorrow is going to be different. And in Hasidic folklore, you're meant to go to sleep. That's the last thing out of your mouth. Morgen wird sein anders. No matter what happened today, no matter how good today is, tomorrow is going to be different. The thing is, it turned into a morning phrase. You wake up and you go, morgen wird sein anders. Tomorrow is going to be different. As if you've already written off that today is not the day of change. The meditation we're doing on Wednesday night is the meditation, the mantra, and the mindset that we must have every single morning when waking up if we want to achieve something. The rest of the series, the plastic brain, is cutting-edge science, which has been front and center for the last couple of years around the world. And the rest of the series, the Kabbala and the different lectures, are really, really important, because just as I've opened up, I hope, your eyes to a little bit of the different voices and the feelings and the process of change within us from a spiritual point of view, we've got to understand and get the support in the different areas. And Johnny Schauder, who's going to be speaking, Dr. Hassad, Dr. Herbst, my father, myself, we're all presenting from different angles, but you will walk off with not just more knowledge, but actually inspiration. I hope tonight I haven't just taught you something. I hope you've been inspired by yourself, by the complexity of yourself and your ability and the strength that you have to be able to get over yourself. Because the Nefesh Bahamis, its outcome will always be that it will one day be subservient to the Nefesh Elokis. And the Yetzer Hara will always be diminished, and the Yetzer Tov will always grow. As one loses its power, the other one rises. It's always 100%. The ratio is all that changes in this whole thing. And you'll find that as you strengthen yourself, and as you practice your Iskafi, and as we practice our Kabbalah soul, and as we really take control of our life, things don't just become easier. We start striving for much bigger goals. No longer is it just about weight loss. It's about much better life all round. Thank you.